Lindsay, in Trump 1.0 from 2017 to 2021, I remember at the time it generated a lot of attention globally. Certainly here in Canada, we were paying attention. And I remember American friends of mine who were saying that they supported Trump very strongly because he was going to go to Washington and he was either going to drain the swamp, which meant get rid of the administrative state and or shrink it, whatever, and get the Congress under control so they did the will of the people, or burn it to the ground, which I thought was a very interesting slogan. What's your take on all of that?
Well, it seems like in the first time that Trump was in office, he didn't do so much of the burning as we've seen in the second time that he's in office, but he certainly launched a counteroffensive. And this was not only emboldening people who wanted to say bad things against left state people who had been bureaucrats for their life, but it was also in the court appointments that he made, where he was able to put justices on the Supreme Court that saw the world in much the way that he does, which is critical and skeptical of the administrative state. So he did a lot in that first term, but that burn it down impulse is something that I don't think we really saw the full force of it until his second term.
I've heard it said that one of the reasons for that is because in his first term, he hired people or appointed people who had expertise. They might have been shared his views of the world. They might not, but they were committed to the machinery of government, to the legacy view of how government should operate, and they kind of, kept him between the lines. Is that a fair take on him?
I think that's a very fair take, and probably this stems from being somewhat of an outsider to politics proper. Donald Trump has always had political opinions, and he's like brushed elbows with the political class, and he's had influence in New York City and state politics. But once he took over as the head of our federal apparatus, instead of being able to just slash and burn and cut, the first time around, he had to hire people who understood what was happening. And most of those people have at least some allegiance to the agencies or the entities that have been doing the machinery of government. So we didn't see all the cutting that we see this time around because you had people who were sort of like pushing back against that because they understood there was a value in having those people around.
What about people like Stephen Miller? He's emerged as a bigger figure in Trump 2.0, but back in the first term, he still played a prominent role. But I think he's matured since then or become consolidated power, however you'd like to describe it. But it often occurs to me when I see the way that Trump operates, he must have a very significant team and high-powered, high wattage team behind him. And did he have that in the first term?
Well, no, he doesn't have the same team now that he had in the first term. And nearly everyone who was with him in term one is no longer with him today. And that's sort of like the churn that we've seen in like the Trump running of things from the beginning of the businesses to now. A few loyalists stick around, but other people get used, chewed up, and then they're sent on their way. And so when we talk about a character like Stephen Miller, something that I sort of situate him as sort of globalizing this argument, where we might say, like, we don't like the administrate domestically. That might have been something that we hear in like the 2010s. And then there's sort of this bigger argument that we should push back against having the United States have a touch in the international administrative state. Like, we shouldn't have all these obligations that tie us to the destinies of other countries. And that's sort of this idea of just undercutting or de-governing or ungoverning that Stephen Miller does this continuing argument for, and probably an expansion into other parts of politics.
We've done some interviews with Professor Russ Muirhead from Dartmouth, who co-authored an article titled "Ungoverning America," which is basically, this argument that Trump is not didn't become president to govern for the people. He came in to basically with his own agenda to ungovern. Uh, do we see the roots of ungoverning in that first term?
Absolutely. We absolutely see the roots of this because it's not just philosophical, but he's sort of in that time learning how he can diminish the role of different parts of government or how he can dismantle things. And then it takes that time out of office for other sorts of players to get involved. So, like the Heritage Foundation or other authors of the 20 Plan Project 2025 to sort of say, like, here's the legal underpinnings for you to actually get that work done. And in term one, it's just sort of figuring out like what are the edges we can push against until you figure out, oh, I can actually open this door fully. But that's something that takes a little bit of time and outside expertise to think on, mull over, and give you a blueprint for doing it. So we're seeing sort of like Act Two right now because Act One was a lot of learning.
Speaking of learning, and or maybe I'm exaggerating here, but it's fascinating to me the role that evangelical Christians, Christian nationalists, have played in the rise of Trump. And did they play any kind of a significant role in his first term within government?
So within government, it's kind of hard to trace one specific religion's tendrils into what everyone else is doing. If we want to talk about how different members of the Republican Party have ascended to leadership, there is a religious undertone to those people who are in power right now. Like, for instance, Speaker Mike Johnson used to lead the Bible study group for Congress before he was something that everyone knew as Speaker. So we do know that the religious right does have many ties into government, and that's something that we might feel like is really ascendant right now, but it was certainly a part of the first administration when Trump was in office.
Lindsay, thank you very much for this. This is episode 4 of a multi-part series, so we'll be looking forward to talking to you in episode 5. And thank you for your insights.
Thank you.